What's good, YouTube? I'm joined here by Dzeeff for another top 5, and this one's a little more interesting in terms of being a little down on the game, and these are the 5, we would call them mechanics, worst mechanics of Yu-Gi-Oh! That are actually used throughout different places in Yu-Gi-Oh! And this first one I'm going to go ahead and name in number 5 is 5 turns later. Any card that has 5 turns after just seems really bad. And Zone Eater being the first one, a monster attacked by this card will be destroyed during the end phase of the 5th turn. So the card has to not leave the field, not be destroyed another way, not be tributed, nothing done with it, not overlain with, for 5 turns. And similarly, Swordsman from a Different Land, which was actually released all the way in Legacy of the Valiant, does a similar thing, or if not the same. If this card is attacked by an opponent's monster, after damage calc, destroy that monster during the 5th end phase after the attack. So, end phase specified there as well. Yeah, basically the exact same effect, just remade.
Yeah, and they're both even terrible, like, in the context of that they're older cards, because Swordsman was in OSG for a really long time. But, like, back then they had, like, Dark Hole and Regeki and stuff like that, so even in that context, like, they had way better removal options. It just wasn't feasible.
Yeah, I guess their level 1 might be their saving attribute, but just note that this is the bottom of the list. So as we head towards number 4, this is kind of a widely hated in the community overall thing, if you want to take us off here.
Yep, so number 2 is the Petite Moth mechanic. You can see Larva Moth right here. So basically you're supposed to summon Petite Moth and then summon Cocoon of Evolution and then equip Cocoon to Petite Moth. Petite Moth gains the stats of it. So I guess it gets 2,000 defense, so that's great or something. And then however many turns pass, you can then upgrade Petite Moth into another monster. The problem is that first of all, that's never going to happen. Like, how are you going to summon both those monsters at the same time? And then how is your opponent just not going to run it over if it only has, like, 2,200 defense? It's just really bad. But also, none of the monsters it summons do anything. They just have more attack. So, like, Larva Moth is, like, 2 turns afterwards, and it literally just has, like, 200 more attack. Like, it has 500 attack instead of 300. And even when you get up to, like, I know, like, Perfectly Ultimate Great Moth is the final one. Even when you get up to that is like 3,500 attack. I think that one's like 10 turns. It's like more than 7, but probably 10 turns after you equip it with Cocoon of Evolution. That is just not feasible. Your opponent could easily just run a Zone Eater into it, and then it wouldn't last that long. But yeah, this is just like one of the worst mechanics ever, but technically it's like playable, and people have gotten it off on like Dev Pro and stuff, but it is just like so unrealistic and so not worth it.
Alright, so I originally thought this would be the worst mechanic on our list, starting with Victory Dragon here. But basically, the OCG actually used to have a rule that Doug informed me of, that if this card hit the field, they couldn't just, like, scoop. And that rule never hit the TCG. I was actually at a regional way back when, and this guy was actually X1 going into the second to last round, and his opponent just, Victory Dragon hits the board, and he's like, I scoop, next game. Like, the mechanic of this card is actually that, if this card attacks your opponent directly and reduces their life points to 0, you win the match, but if it hits the board and is in a position to attack you, you can scoop at any time in Yu-Gi-Oh! Unless you're in the World's Championship where you can't scoop.
Right, so that's what I was saying, because, like, even if they invented a new rule, like they had an OCG where, like, if you summon this, you can't just, like, scoop the game. Then you could just, like, scoop the game when your opponent summons 3 dragons and hasn't used a normal summon. And, like, so the only context this would ever be even remotely playable is, like, Worlds format, where they have to take damage to lose. But even then, it's, like, so inconsistent to summon and, like, just really bad. I mean, I don't know, because even ignoring like the fact that they can just scoop, the requirements are actually kind of ridiculous anyway. Because like you have to 3 dragons. It's not even a special summon. You can't even special summon it, and it has to do the final attack on their life points. That's a lot going against it.
Yeah, it's definitely just pretty like much. They come with a big body. That's like their saving grace, but the mechanic of trying to end the game just isn't good enough. I could see, like, if this card did damage, you win the duel. Like, that would actually be a very threatening thing. But something that people can just scoop to except for a specific format. And then most of them, like Victory Dragon's now banned, but it was actually played at one point and had to face this, is just pretty bad. And then we go into our number 3 here, and that's, I would almost call these joke cards.
Yeah, so these are all pretty bad. So basically, they just help your opponent win. We have, I mean, like you can read through these. Like, reveal your hand, choose one card, and shuffle it into the deck. So you -2 to show your opponent your hand, or like you give your opponent 2 cards, or you give your opponent a card. Like they're all just usually just straight minuses that they have like no real reason that you would ever play them. And I know some people, when Graceful Tear got announced, people were like, oh, there was a Zodiac thread about like, what could we possibly do with this? Like, oh, you could like mind crush it, but then like, why wouldn't you just play, like, why would you, like, that's such a huge setup. It's like a -3 just to take a card out of your opponent's hand that you gave them in the first place. So like, all these cards are just really bad and only help you lose. I don't know why you would ever play them.
Super situational. Like, yeah, the Gift of Greed could deck your opponent if they have 2 cards left in deck. The Graceful Tear, I guess you could give them a Dark World, and then, but it's still not by your opponent when it's sent to your graveyard. And then Humble Sentry, reveal your hand, choose a card and shuffle it to your deck. You literally neg yourself 1. And then you neg yourself a second card and you reveal all the information. And then our final card here, first place here, in my opinion, is switching zones. Cards that actually switch other cards' zones. Because zones already are such a underused mechanic. They tried to make it a thing, and players just don't really abide by zones. So that if you're going to be playing by it, you almost have to tell your opponent, hey, you've got to decide which zones you're using. But not only can this not even move it to any zone, it says adjacent unoccupied zone. It's just kind of funny that they had to limit that power on top of everything.
Yeah. And it's also funny because the cards that this card would work well with, if you like go on the Wikia and look in the tip section, all the cards that this works well with can already move themselves. So like they don't need this added movement. So it doesn't even like matter in that regard. And like the best card that deals with zones is Blasting the Fuse, which was used on DN because people were locked into putting their cards in the middle of the screen. But realistically, like the zone is just like your opponent's going to know that you're playing these cards if you tell them beforehand. And if you don't tell them beforehand, it's going to create a lot of ruling issues later on. They're just bad.
Yeah, I played it across from my opponent. Well, I didn't declare which zone. Like, a lot of mats don't even have zones anymore because these cards are so underutilized / just don't do anything. Like, we found about 2 good ones. The Rhino card that, like, boosts 500 attack and can move itself zones already adjacently, I believe. Across from another monster, and it gains 500 attack, which was actually used back in the day, but again, it moves itself. So cards, I would say, that move other card zones are the most useless in the entire game, because almost any card you would want to move a zone can move itself. Any final notes here?
Nope, I think that covers our list of terrible mechanics.
Alright guys, so this is actually Dzeeff's channel. I know he's been doing a lot of videos with me lately, but if you guys want to go check him out, he has a ton of interesting discussions. We actually talk about a lot of the things together, and he's probably been on, I think 4 or 5 of my videos lately, but I just wanted to give him a proper shout out here at the end of this one. He definitely does a lot of things that I don't do myself. Like, if you're interested in Duel Links, he has some relatively big videos on Duel Links, including like this 90,000 viewed video, top 10 strongest Duel Links Yu-Gi-Oh cards. And he's really into the game, so he has a lot of advice to offer that I otherwise wouldn't be able to do on games like that. He does what he calls makes rogue decks the best they could be on a competitive level. So you can like see the Shinobird Ritual Spirits deck profile, has a lot of views as well. Like, I would know nothing about that deck or the Spirit Monster, so he can actually give you a pretty competitive insight into a lot of decks that otherwise wouldn't be looked at. And like I said, also, he's been very deep into Duel Links, like gameplay and everything. And then he does fun general discussions as well, like we do. And he's been on the channel a lot. You can click the link down below, or on the outro, you can actually click his channel. It'll be linked there also, and you can check him out. He's done everything. Like, if we look at his most popular videos, he's been a tuber for a long time. You see, like, Jeff Jones' deck profile, Patrick Hoban deck profile. He's around the competitive scene too, and you'll see top cut deck profiles as well when he goes out to events. So it's just something to go and do. Check him out. Be sure to subscribe. He's relatively growing, actually very fast lately too, and he's been working on doing something every day, so you definitely want to check him out, and I'm sure he'll be more on the channel a lot heading forwards, and I just want you guys to get to know him as well as I have been getting to know him, so be sure to do that for me, guys. Thanks for watching.